Welcome to Bytes of Code. In this video we're going to be printing our board for tic-tac-toe. We're going to be going over what a dictionary is, learning about dictionary, making the dictionary, which actually is going to be our board, and then we're going to be going into functions. This is going to be the first time we're going to be using a function. We're going to be learning what a function is and how to use it. At the end of this tutorial we'll have a board that looks like this for our tic-tac-toe. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to start with a print statement, just a regular title, tic-tac-toe, nothing fancy. I do want to bring out that we are going to be using just single quotation. So there is not really a standard, but Python in its documentation, Python Enhancement Proposal, PEP, does say that single quoted strings and double quoted strings are the same. This PEP does not make a recommendation for this. Pick a rule and stick to it. So basically, do what you want. Single quoted strings and double quoted strings are the same. We're going to just go ahead and use single quoted strings. Let's do a quick example actually. Let's do single quoted string and double quoted string. This is kind of a little off topic, but we'll do this because it's nice to know. So we have C as a single quoted string and C as a double quoted string, just the letter C. We print tic-tac-toe, then we print C, then we print the type of C double quoted string and C single quoted string. And basically what we're seeing is we're seeing the exact same result. C prints out exactly the same. Both single and double quoted are used exactly the same for Python, and even more so, they are the exact same variable type. And that can be a little confusing if you're coming from another language. Usually this may be something simple like a character or maybe even a varchar, but in Python, these are both seen as the exact same variable type. So that kind of lets us know that, hey, it's all right to use single quote whenever we feel like it, just as long as something is consistent, like the PEP brought out. Okay, so we have our little title. Now we're going to make our dictionary. Our dictionary is going to be called the board. And how to use a dictionary is to put in a variable name. In this case is the board. Put your equal sign. And what really distinguishes a dictionary is when we use open squiggly bracket and close squiggly bracket. In this case, we're going to be using numbers, or the number 1, even though it's a string, as our key, and also the number 1, even though it's a string, as our value. We're going to be doing this 9 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think that's 9. Tab it all a little bit. So these will be our key value pairs. So what this will do is whenever we ask for the value of, in this case, 4, it will give us the number 4. We ask for the value of number 5, it will give us number 5. And this is something that we want. We're going to use this to keep track of board positioning. Eventually what this will be is actually saving not numbers or strings. It will be saving the X's and O's. So that will be actually the player moves. So if we say, give me the value of number 9, we can actually say, now set it to X. And that's going to be how we're moving across the board for our user. Okay, it is not equals. By the way, it is a colon instead of equals. Sorry about that. All right, so we have our board. So still, it's kind of something simple. We are just printing tic-tac-toe at this point, even though we have a dictionary with keys and values, 9 keys and values to be exact, but we're not doing anything with it. So here comes a function. Functions start with the word DEF. DEF, or the letters DEF. I guess DEF is not a word. After the letters DEF, you actually put in your function name. So in this case, we're going to call it my super cool function. This is not the function we're actually going to use for tic-tac-toe, but this is going to be an example of how to use a function. Open and close parentheses after the name, and then a colon. After the colon, we want to make sure that we are indented. It's similar to the if conditions and while loops. We want to make sure that we have an indent here So we actually have code that it belongs to this function. I'm using, there we go. I'm in the super cool function. That's what we're going to print out. So right now, if we run this, we still only get tic-tac-toe because this function exists, but it's not being used. We have to make sure to tell our script, our Python, that we want to use this function. And here we have it now. It says, I am in the super cool function. So we notice how to use a function is just calling the function name. But it's important to note that it is outside of the function. The spacing, I'm going to bring it a little closer so it's a little more visible. The spacing for this print line is indented. That means that this print line belongs to this function, my super cool function. But when we use in line 32, my super cool function, this is not indented. That means that this belongs outside of the function, and that's what we want. If we were to indent this, to use this inside the function, we wouldn't get to the function because we still don't have anybody calling my super cool function. We want to make sure that the function is being called outside of the function. Let's do a couple more examples. What you can do with functions also is you can pass in parameters. So we're just going to put parameter name, and let's go ahead and just print whatever we pass in. Parameter name. So when we call my super cool function right now, if we don't change anything in line 35, we will actually get an error. The error is basically telling us, hey, you can't use this because you haven't given it a parameter. In this case, the parameter is called my parameter name. Well, it can be called anything, but something needs to be passed here. A parameter, a variable needs to be passed here to get to my super cool function. So let's go ahead and type in hello world. Now we're passing in a variable, and we can see as a result we have I'm in the super cool function, line 31, and also line 32 prints. And you can also do something like actually make a variable. And you can pass it in. And this would be equivalent to just passing in the text hi there, and that's what we're getting here. Also, you can pass in multiple parameters. You can use a comma. Parameter number 2. Parameter, spelled correctly. So we can have parameter number 1 and parameter number 2. And what we can actually do is we can print parameter number 1 plus parameter number 2. And we're going to pretend these are numbers that we're passing in. So let's do 5 and 10. If we were to pass these two numbers in, 5 and 10, we would get I'm in the super cool function, number 31, and then we would get line 32, the sum of our two parameters passed in, 5 and 10, 15. So this is how we're going to be using a function. One massive thing to note, very important, is that the function needs to be defined before we use it. I simply copied my super cool function whenever I'm calling it, and I put it ahead of the actual function definition. And we can see there's an error here. It's saying it's undefined name my super cool function. It doesn't know what this is. Python is not aware of whatever this is called my super cool function. That's because I'm calling it before it's defined. If I just make sure to use this function to define this function, let's just do it right here. Before I call it, then Python recognizes that it's a function and that it can use it. So we want to make sure to define all of our functions before we use them. So because of that, you usually will find functions hovering more towards the top. So let's go ahead and actually use a function now. We're going to call this function print board. Because this will have one very simple task. This function will be very simple but important. This function will present the board to the user in a grid format, kind of looking like a tic-tac-toe board. So what we want to do is we want to pass the board. So this is going to be passed a dictionary. We're going to expect a dictionary here. And because of that, we're just going to start printing keys, or I should say values, from the board. And just to make it look like an actual board, we're going to be using these pipe signs. And we're going to do this for our entire board for all 9 keys. So just an example of as to what this would look like right now. If we use the function print board, this is also kind of interesting, that's going to come up, and we pass the board, because this is our dictionary, we're going to see an error, undefined name the board, because we're actually calling this variable, the board, we're calling it but before it's being defined. So we want to make sure to use this definition, the board. You can even put it up here. We want to make sure to define it, kind of telling Python this is what my variable, the board, is. This is what it's equal to, before we actually use the variable. So now we have our dictionary, the board, we have our function print board, and we have one line of code in our function to actually print something. So when we run it here, we actually can take a look as to what's going on. We have the number 1, which is here. We're asking, please give me the value of number 1 from the dictionary, which in this case is 1. We have a pipe sign, just for aesthetic looks. Then we ask again, please give me the value for the key of 2, which in this case is 2, a pipe sign, and the number 3. We do this again with the third number, just to give some emphasis as to what actually is happening here. We're going to change some values so we can see it changed on the board. And we can see that when we ask for the key of 1, we get the value of 1. When in this case it's just ONE, 1. And the same thing is happening with 2 and 3. So it might look like the actual value is the key, but it's just because they're the same right now. And it will make more sense whenever we start writing more of the tic-tac-toe, because we'll see why we actually need kind of this format, why it kind of helps out. What we're going to do now is we're going to print a little divider. This is just going to be aesthetic, and we're going to show it too. So we have 1, 2, 3, and kind of like a little divider. So we're starting the first third of our board, and we're going to do this for our second row, which is 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6, not 63, and also 7, 8, 9. And now we have a tic-tac-toe board. I don't like how close the tic-tac-toe title is, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some line breaks. 3 line breaks, I think this is good enough. I'm just going to push the board down a little bit. You can see the space between the tic-tac-toe and the actual board. So just kind of like review, let's talk about what we've done. We've made a dictionary. It's called the board. This dictionary has 9 keys and values. Right now the key happens to be equal to the value. The key of 1 will give you back 1 as a string, and everything is a string right now. We have our first function, it's called print board. This takes a parameter, and this parameter actually is a dictionary. With this dictionary, we're able to open up the values from the board dictionary and start placing them and printing them to kind of mimic an actual board for the user. We print 1, 2, 3 on the first row, spaced with pipe sign. We print a little divider, Then we print 4, 5, 6 values, second row, a divider, and again 7, 8, 9 as our last and third row. But this actually is just a function. It's not being used until line 36, I'm sorry. So line 34, this is actually our first line that's being printed, tic-tac-toe. Then line 36 is our board that's actually being printed. Even though we have a function, the function will not print anything. I just deleted the print board call at line 36. The function won't print anything unless we use it. So whenever we have a function, we need to make sure to actually use it. Putting that line back in at 36, we're calling the print board function, and we're actually getting our board back. Just one real quick interesting thing is we can see the type of the board because when you pass parameters, it may not be always obvious what the parameter is, the variable type. Is this a string? Is this an integer? Is this a decimal? Is this a Boolean? Is this a dictionary? We don't know, but if you make the function, then the short answer is then you know. But you can check it right here just for emphasis. We'll see, like we'll make sure that this is a dictionary. And we see the very first thing we do is print the type of this variable. We're asking kind of like, what are you? And we see it here, it's a class of dictionary. So we know we're safe here, we're passing a dictionary, but when using functions, you have to keep track of what you're passing. That's kind of the short answer, is you need to make sure to know that you're passing a dictionary so that whenever you're in the function, you know you're dealing with the dictionary. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. We'll end the video here. If you have any questions or something's not really working for you, please put it in the comments section. I will reply. Thank you so much for watching the video. Again, if you haven't subscribed, you're interested in following this tutorial to see where our tic-tac-toe game will end up, please subscribe and drop a like. Again, thank you so much for taking your time to watch this video, and I hope to see you at the next video.